Welcome to the Orca. A city is far more than just roads and infrastructure. It's a cultural hub as well, and public art is part of that commitment to beauty and to heritage. But what happens when public art becomes, well, a community lightning rod of sorts? In the middle of busy Kingsway, East Vancouver, a new 40-meter high, 120-foot high ladder to nowhere has been built. And the cost? $671,000. And as you can imagine, it's sparking questions now about public art, public priorities, and the public purse. Mike Klassen is a city columnist for the Vancouver Courier newspaper, recently wrote about the ladder to nowhere and joined us here in the Orca studios today. Mike, always welcome. Hello there.
Hello, Rick.
Whose idea was this?
My understanding is that the developer, and if you appreciate that this little strip of Kingsway it's one of the older neighborhoods on the east side. It's not particularly what you would sort of consider to be, it's kind of lower end income, some houses around there. And this area is kind of known for a McDonald's, a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and a dollar store and a beer and wine store. It really was not a very elegant part of Kingsway. But along comes this quite grand-looking white building. It really dominates the surroundings by Westbank, who are famous for being luxury condo developers. And they're building Vancouver House, the big sort of spiral building at the end of Granville Bridge, and other famous buildings like the Woodward's building. And they have an obligation to contribute dollars towards the community, called a community amenity contribution. During the application process for this upzoning of this property, they agreed to pay $671,000 to a piece of public art. And as a result, the city moved forward. This is back in 2013, so council thought it was a good idea. I assume it went through some kind of vetting process from a public art committee of some kind, and what we have today is the big ladder in the middle of Kingsway.
In the middle of a busy arterial road on a boulevard that is no more than 3 or 4 feet wide, it certainly is sparking controversy, not only around the city, and the neighborhood in particular, and around the city, but people around the country are saying, what? And it's $671,000.
You know what, I said when I wrote my piece that I hope the artist got a good commission, because we need our artists, and so I don't actually know what a great big piece of steel like that would cost. I'm sure it's quite considerable. I'm sure to build it and plant it in the ground where it is was very expensive as well. But at the same time, you almost want the community and the public to be involved in these things. I mean, I appreciate the fact that good art can sometimes be provocative and cause conversation, which this one certainly is. But in this case, it has no sort of functional connection to the neighborhood. It certainly doesn't, it's not accessible unless you kind of go out in the middle of traffic, which I did see yesterday when I was driving home, somebody literally standing at the bottom, one step off the curb and trying to take a picture of the ladder from the bottom.
And that's what I was going to get at, because a lot of the public art that's already here, and I think that the two bigs we've spoken about, the sparrows at Olympic Village, people love to go up and have their pictures taken with them, and of course the Laughing Men at Denman and Davie, which have got a whole new patina now because people are all over them. They want to embrace their public art. There's no opportunity for this because you're going by it at 30 kilometers an hour. You sort of say, what was that when you go by? There's no opportunity to have your picture taken with it, go look at it up close and personal, because it's, as I say, in the middle of this busy arterial road on no more than 3 or 4 feet of concrete.
I haven't heard anybody from the city defend this particular project. What I have heard since I've written the column is that, and this will make some people shake their heads even more, is that the actual base of the ladder was not the way it was intended for the artist. So if you're driving straight up Kingsway, you were hoping to see the rungs of the ladder going all the way up. And as a result, it's on an angle, so you can't really see it. So the best sort of vision for it. So it badly implemented, probably, and again, with greatest respect to the artist, I'm sure that the artist has some great work. But this one, to me, made no connection. And again, it really sort of seemed, I called it sticking the finger to City Hall, which I think the neighborhood probably looks at it and thinks that it's more of an emblem of that.
before we leave this topic, you touched on something I wanted to bring up, and that is that public art is supposed to inspire people, engage them in conversation and debate and thinking, which this has certainly done, but it hasn't done it for people around the city or the people in this community in particular?
Well, I think, I hope that at least it does trigger some kind of debate. I have a feeling that that the city is going to look at this and try not to repeat this particular style of art, again, disconnected from the city. There's also the public safety concerns that I'm sure that the fire department have already weighed in on it. Somebody could, there's tempered glass that goes up about 20 feet. If somebody scales above that or gets through it somehow and climbs up it, we could have something terrible happen. But, you know, I didn't even want to think about that part.
All right, let's leave that. While you're here, what other interesting stories have you discovered around the municipal politics of the Lower Mainland?
Yeah, no, municipal politics, I mean, there's so much going on provincially and federally these days, but municipal politics is contributing as well. We just had the Vancouver City Council give themselves a raise. I gather that the more fiscally prudent NPA voted against it. But the majority of members of council decided to give themselves a substantial increase to their discretionary spending. I consider this to be a slush fund because I know that these funds generally are used by politicians for sort of political activity and coming up with.
Now you call it a slush fund. How much money are we talking about? And who has access to it for what purpose?
It'll be $300,000, but it'll be divided up between 10 councillors.
So $30,000 each.
Yeah. Now, we currently have a $6,000 amount of money, and comparisons are always made between other cities and the individual budgets of city councillors, of which Vancouver is smaller in terms of other Canadian cities, but Vancouver has an at-large system, which a lot of people don't really appreciate when they start comparing us to cities like Calgary, Edmonton, or Toronto. We do not have wards. We don't have constituencies broken around the city. We essentially have a board of governors who gets to make choices around budgets and zoning and grants. And they are a board of governors and should be seen as such and overall very representative of the city. So that's one issue that I think is, I think people are sort of asking themselves, could we not have talked about this 2 months ago when the budget was being done?
Right.
Another really interesting story that I think will catch the attention of more people now that it's just happened. City of New Westminster has a very kind of pro-labor council. They're a small city right here in the sort of the heart of Metro Vancouver, and they have just taken a stratified building, a property owned by an individual owner that has units that were rented out, and turned the zoning using brand new legislation that just came down in the past year or so from the provincial government. So kind of the unintended consequences of this new legislation is it allows rental land to be zoned as rental. And so we think that's a good thing, and it sounds great. And all the people who came out, and by the way, this motion to do this was put on the website, city's website, on a Friday afternoon, usually a sign that they want it to be hidden. The meeting happened Monday. The room was packed full of people saying, we must stop rent evictions, we need all this rental. Of course we do. But the poor property owner is going, wait a sec, you just took away my property rights and the value of that property for me. I've been paying taxes as if it is at a higher rate as if it is a strata building.
So let me get this straight. Is the city saying that certain units in a building which is now a strata building will now be for rental purposes only and forever?
So they did not identify individual units within this building. They took the entire building that is currently all being rented, but said we're going to zone you as rental, even though it was owned by a single owner, and they basically rented out all the strata units. I know it sounds a little confusing, but you have to start to imagine that we will start seeing this applied in other cities. Now that the City of New Westminster has done this, and the Urban Development Institute and other people and analysts in the rental market sector are saying this is going to have a downward pressure on the amount of rental that gets built, and we know that we have a shortage of rental in this housing market. So I'm not sure if this is going to have, again, more unintended consequences.
Final question I want to bring up is, once again, back to Vancouver City Council. This council is going down the same path, we'll say, as the previous council, bike paths. But now they want to dedicate lanes on the Granville Bridge to pedestrians and cyclists in the middle of the bridge.
Yeah. It's an interesting approach. Now, we've known about this since about 2012. It was originally put out as a drawing, and if you actually look at the drawings that the city keeps putting out, it's always from about 70 or 80 or 100 feet above the ground, which looks really great when you're looking down there. But when you're down on the road, you're just going to have cars whizzing by you on both sides. So you're going to be building this, this pathway down the middle of the city. The engineering department usually gets what it wants from council. And this will be no different. This will be approved, and they are going to be putting a dual kind of pedestrian and bicycle pathway down the middle of the bridge, which I think, in fairness, has overcapacity. It's a bridge. We have about 4 bridges that leave the downtown core going south into the city, and this one was built in the 1950s, and it's really large. You could probably take away a lane or so, but the fact that it's right in the middle of the street begs some questions if they maybe could have thought about the design a little bit more on that one. And I also wonder, and you know, heaven forbid we sort of, but the West End core, if there is a some kind of public emergency or a natural disaster, people do need to get out of the downtown core. That is one street that does provide the extra capacity that they might need in that instance.
Never a dull moment at City Hall, is it?
Never, no, not at all.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Rick.